your soul on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Heard also at grnonline.com and on your smartphone.
Welcome to The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Join us as we journey together on this pilgrimage of faith. And now your host, Sarah Soto.
Hey y'all, it's so good to be with you on this beautiful Monday afternoon. Oh my goodness, I know I say it every single time. I'm so excited to have such a special guest. Have you heard me say that so many times over the last year? But I really am so excited. I have such a special guest in the studio here with me. I'm a Catholic wife, mom, and speaker. For more information, you can always reach out to me. Contact me on my website at sarahsotospeaks.com. Y'all, in the studio, live with me here today, and now it's so official. You can see me and all my special guests on camera. We're doing a full video feed. So you can see all of the many, many faces that I am, well, a little infamous for making every time that I talk. It's not just the sound of my voice that will be journeying with you in your car, on the Guadalupe Radio Network app, etc. You'll get to see all of the, there's a lot of expressions. I've been told they make a lot of expressions. And so join us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, on the whole internet. The whole internet. You can see all the faces that I'll be making. And I'm just so excited to have in the house with me the one and only, well, he's a return guest, Father Raymond Pendleton. He was just ordained about a year ago, so we want to congratulate him on his first year of priesthood for the Diocese of Corpus Christi. He's here for the summer, taking a break from studying canon law at the Angelicum. So it's very serious, if you couldn't tell. He's about to start his third year studying canon law. Welcome back to the show, Father Raymond.
Thank you, Sarah. Good to be back.
I'm so happy to have you here. Father Raymond is a great friend and always up for lots of questions and an intense dialogue with me, I feel like. But to start things off on kind of a lighter, well, today we're going to talk about some really serious stuff. So, Father Raymond, in the future, if you become a canonized saint of the church, what would you be the patron saint of?
Oh, well, for those of you who know me, you know my great love for our Lord Jesus, for the church, and for my family and friends. After that, my great love for Panda Express, their orange chicken. So without a doubt, it would be patron saint of all Panda Express locations.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's okay. You know, that's your thing, you know? So if there's a patron saint for everything, why wouldn't there be a patron saint for all?
Pray without ceasing. So while you're eating orange chicken, offer it up.
It's so specific. I really, when I asked you, I thought you were going to say something, I don't know, cool, like pickleball or I don't know, but no.
I'm not that good at pickleball, to be patron saint of pickleball.
But you're really good at orange chicken.
A connoisseur, if you will.
Oh my goodness. So now that we're on video, now that we're doing the quest on video, which I am so excited about, we're not talking about video today, but it did bring up an interesting question that we were talking about before we went live, which is if I wanted to go to confession, and since I have this nice little video set up and I could call you while you're in Italy, which doesn't have a lot of Panda Express, as it turns out. None. Like I checked.
I did.
So when you're in Italy and I'm here in Texas, and I really like Father Raymond's such a good confessor. I wonder, could I video call you and could we have confession over like a secure, because you can have like medical visits, telemed visits and all that. And
right.
It's HIPAA certified or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not making stuff up, but can you do that with confession? Could you hear my confession?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. That's a really good question, especially during the pandemic. That question did come up quite often, but now with technology, being probably pretty much in every facet of our lives,
right.
That's a pretty valid question. But the short answer is no. But here's the facts.
Yeah.
So every sacrament requires proximity. Okay. So the recipient and the minister, right? Or in the case of marriage, the couple, right? Mm-hmm. Those intending to become married, right? It requires proximity. You've got to be there.
No
right?
webcam marriages, got it.
Yeah, right. So you can't do webcam marriages. That does not exist either. But that's required for the sacrament, and the reason is because it's according to our human nature, right? We're not just intellectual things, prowling about the world, like we are made of bodies as well.
Yeah.
We are soul and body. And so Christ, knowing that, instituted the sacraments according to our mode of being, like living as human beings, a rational soul and also a physical body. And so that's why in the sacraments, there's always that element of the physical element of proximity that has to be there. So you really couldn't do that even for confession, which requires no touching on the head, laying hands on the head or anything like that, or water or the Eucharist. It does require still that physical proximity, just like all the other sacraments.
Yeah, and plus, if you were to be holding your hand up like over a webcam, blessing somebody, I mean, that's like it's very very popish.
Yeah,
like
very
be blessing the
popish,
whole world, which
you know.
you're not typically going
very
to.
Easter,
Yeah.
you know, yes.
It's very, very Easter. I like it. Okay, so thanks for answering that. But also, it's like the seal of confession is taken extremely seriously, as most of our faithful Catholic listeners are aware of. I work with a lot of teens, and they're like, "You mean to tell me that if I go tell that priest what I did, they're not going to tell my mom?" They ask me that all the time.
Yeah.
It's like holding kids back from going to confession because they immediately think the priest is going to, so no, the priest is not going to go. He might suggest it would be a good idea if you told your mom that you took the car for a joyride. But he can't.
Extremely terrible sin for a priest. So bad, it's excommunicable. So bad that, you cannot divulge that information.
Yeah, no matter what.
Or the penitent who came to confession.
Right.
Yeah, can't, no matter what.
And so that being said, if the church takes the seal of confession that seriously, then we ought to know that HIPAA certified or otherwise, if there's even the chance that the seal could be, what's the word?
Violated or broken.
Thank you. Yeah, if there's even a
broken
chance,
or violated.
right? Not that I don't trust your streaming service or FaceTime.
It's probably very bad.
Yeah, we're just we'll nip that one in the bud for you. And yes, proximity, but also we're gonna protect the seal.
Right.
So go to your local confessor. Don't call Father Raymond in Rome at midnight. up late studying canon law. Speaking of canon law, you would not believe for how long I have been trying to do a show about today's topic. I have asked and asked around. It's like the number one requested topic. I've been saying I'm going to do it forever. And without further ado, I'm so thankful that you've agreed to do this. Today, Father Raymond and I are going to talk about annulments.
Of course,
We'll
tackle those questions. We will tackle them.
We're going to talk about annulments. I get questions about them all the time, and there's so many. It's not like CCD, right? There's not like an annulment CCD equivalent where you're showing up on Saturday morning after you're down in your Fruity Pebbles or your leftover orange chicken, and you go and sit in class and you talk about, well, what is an annulment? How does it work? And it's just, there are a lot of, and then you can Google something and get like totally non-Catholic results, and so then it causes further confusion. Or you meet your local Protestant buddy who says, yeah, that's just the church trying to exert power. I mean, so there's so much confusion out there, right? And you may even ask like the very kind-hearted secretary at your parish, and they might not have all the information. And so that being said, we have asked through my Instagram and through some little spots on the radio for the last couple of weeks for listeners to submit their questions. And I will say that our phone lines are open. So if you're just tuning in and you're just hearing about it, Father Raymond and I are live talking about all your annulment-related questions. No question is too silly. No question is dumb. And even if you feel like, well, surely they're going to cover it, if you don't hear us talking about it, feel free to call. The number is 877-757-9424. Father Raymond is very humble, and he'll be the first person to say, I need to look into that a little more. He's not going to try to answer just to sound cool or look cool, because now we're on video and you can see us both and all of the many faces we're both making. We're on video. But you can give us a call and answer, or we're happy to address your questions. 877-757-9424. One more time, that's 877-757-9424. Call and ask us your annulment-related questions. So, as we wait for your calls or your emails that are continuing to come in at thequest@grnonline.com, we're going to start with some already submitted questions, if that's all right with you.
Of course.
Excellent. So, future patron of Orange Chicken and all things Panda Express related, Father Raymond. First things first, before we answer the questions, I'll just ask you, is the Catholic annulment process, or our annulments, if people don't even know what they are, I mean, we could be starting really like far back here. Is that just a fancy expression for a Catholic divorce?
Yeah. They're all going to be good questions, but I'll say that's a good question, right? That's just a
What if-
blanket
I'm gonna
statement.
ask you that. That's
They'll all
a
be good
terrible
questions,
question.
right? But that is a good question, because even before studying canon law, even before entering seminary, I'd always heard that, right? Well, it's the Catholic version of divorce, but it's really contrary to Genesis, the book of Genesis, right? It's contrary to what Christ says, what God has joined, man cannot put asunder, okay, or separate,
Right.
Or dissolve. So really and truly, the church doesn't recognize divorce.
Yeah.
So an annulment is not divorce. What an annulment is, it's a declaration, right? So an annulment isn't done, right? The church doesn't dissolve or take away the marriage. What the church does in her process, annulment process, is she declares, right, through a judge, through a tribunal, she declares that the marriage was null and void, right? That it never actually existed. So that's what an annulment is.
Okay.
It's not divorce.
Yeah. And there are a lot of factors that have to be there in order for it to be a valid marriage. And so it's like an investigation, right? Like there's an investigation looking into, were these factors there, and therefore did a marriage actually occur?
That's right.
So the declaration, it did or it didn't. So we have so many of your wonderful questions to go over, and like I said, there's no silly or goofy question. We have a caller from Florida that we'll take as soon as we get back from a short break, but give us a call at 877-757-9424. I'm here live with Father Raymond Pendleton, talking about all things annulment. We'll be back after a very short break.
I'm in a good place in my life.
And I'm energized by new adventures.
I've got friends to laugh with.
And a good relationship.
But even though I'm kind of comfortable,
I sometimes wonder, is there something more?
Could God and church be what you're looking for? Come and see at CatholicsComeHome.com.
It was somewhat of an accident, and I have a lot of windshield time driving for work, and usually I'm listening to my gospel music, and so I wanted to find something else different. And so I started scrolling. I found Guadalupe Radio. I started listening to it on a regular basis, and what I realized, had I found this station years ago, my conversion would have probably happened years ago.
The Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
Welcome back to The Quest, an extraordinary journey where every step brings us closer to discovering God's love for us. Want to join the conversation? Give us a call at 877-757-9424.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, I'm here live with Father Raymond Pendleton, who is about to start his third year of studying canon law at the, well, let's give it the long name, at the Pontifical College of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome, aka the Angelicum. Did I tell you that our mutual friend, Father Brady, said that I sound like George W. Bush when I speak Latin?
You sound like George W. Bush.
He's like,
how does that happen?
well, when I was studying moral theology, we read like a bunch of stuff, like old encyclicals, and I would call him and be like, "Hey, I have a question about arcanum, or arcanum, or something." Anyway, I don't speak Latin very eloquently.
I would love to hear him recite the Summa Theologica. That would be amazing.
Anyway, we're talking about all things annulment related today, and Father Raymond, who has been a priest for a little over a year and a good friend of mine, has graciously agreed to help answer all your annulment related questions. We have Amy from Florida on the line. Amy, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey, thanks for calling. You have a question for Father Raymond?
I do. I've been married 36 years. I was pregnant when we got married, and the church would not marry us. And always wanted to get our marriage blessed in the church. About 15 years into our marriage, we took a pilgrimage to Israel. And while at Cana, we were able to pay, and the priest there blessed our marriage and gave us our certificate. And I thought that was such a beautiful, done thing. And 36 years later, my husband has had some sort of a breakdown, but he has left me and filed for divorce and with another woman. And I'm sitting here going, I don't know what that means in the church. Are we married in the church? Was our marriage ever real? Am I married to him for the rest of my life? That's how it feels to me. So curious what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. That's a really good question. Also, I'm sorry, this anytime we deal with annulment, the process, it's never a happy thing. It's always very sad, and there are very real consequences. So, so I'm very sorry to hear that. But one thing that we always have to remember, that in this process, in the annulment process, right, for the church to either declare the marriage as annulled or to declare the marriage as valid, the marriage is always presumed to be valid until otherwise proven. Okay, so that's why we need the process. So we really couldn't say on the outset whether this marriage is valid or not. However, if you were to submit a petition to the diocesan tribunal, you can always state the facts. So in that petition application, you would write down the facts of the marriage before the marriage, when the marriage took place, so at Cana, and then the events that took place throughout the marriage. And that would all be considered as proofs or evidence, and that would help the judges decide, to see whether or not that marriage is actually valid. What the church looks for is the actual celebration, right? So at Cana, when you and your husband exchange vows or consent, what went on there, right? Were you all free to actually marry? Was he free to actually marry? So this process would go through these events. They would go through witness testimonies that you'd provide, and the judges would see whether or not either of you, in this case your husband more particularly, was ready to be married, was free to be married. But that would need the process to really declare whether or not the marriage is valid.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I just assumed for the rest of my life, I told God I was married to him forever, but people say to me, oh, you should start working on annulment. That takes forever. And I'm like, I don't know. So
well,
thank
Amy,
you.
You can petition. You're always free to do that. But if you believe that your marriage was valid, if all the conditions were right, including your husband's will, what his knowledge of what marriage takes, then sadly it's just the relationship just wasn't strong enough. It didn't hold. But the sacrament was maybe have been valid.
So that you don't have to apply.
But you don't have to apply for an annulment. You do not have to.
All right. All right. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks so much for your
Thank
call,
you,
Amy. God bless you. So again, if you have any questions, and each case is so unique, but at the end of the day, whatever we can provide for you, right, on this short time that we have together, Father Raymond and I are happy to take your questions. You can give us a call at 877-757-9424. You can shoot us an email at thequest@grnonline.com. Again, that number is 877-757-9424. I'm in the studio with Father Raymond Pendleton, and we're going through some questions we've received via email and through my Instagram that are about annulments. We gave a little background here, but if you're just tuning in, we're going to try to get through all these questions that were submitted. They're all very good questions, and I'm just so grateful that Father Raymond has agreed to be with us here today. So without further ado, let's jump right into the questions. So the first one comes from Amado, and he asks, is infidelity grounds for an annulment? If there is infidelity in the marriage, could you declare that the marriage was null and void?
Okay. That's a great question, Mr. Amado. But the short answer is it depends, which is a long answer, really, if you think about that. But if it's one occasion or even a couple of infidelity after the marriage, okay, let's say there is no history of infidelity, or even infidelity, cheating, during just moments before, even, or with the intention of cheating, moments before the celebration of marriage, that's not grounds right off the bat for annulment. Now, what I will say, this is a subject rarely spoken about in the church, is we have our own process of separation. So in canon law, we do have the process for separation with the bond of the marriage remaining. Now, infidelity is a just cause for separation. You can go to your bishop, say, like, look, this has happened. We can't reconcile things at the moment, but we need to separate for the good of the marriage, for the good of the family, and take some time before it can become reconcilable. So that's an option. You can do that. That's valid. So separation is possible, but it's not grounds. It's not grounds for an annulment.
Yeah. I don't love that that's not spoken about often.
Right.
But I do really love, and it's as a married person, it's so touching to me that the call, that there's a call for the church for the bishop to shepherd you in that really difficult, I think a lot of people who are experiencing infidelity in their marriage they feel very alone. Right. Even though it's unfortunately a common occurrence these days. But they feel very alone, and I hate to say it, but often not fit to be participating in the sacramental life. And so if there is a valid reason to separate, right, like you said, for the good of the marriage, for the good of the family, and you are like looping the bishop in, then there is, that brings one of the most important questions I have found in my experience in the work that I've done up, which is if you go and get a valid separation, or even if you go through a civil divorce, does that mean you can't receive Holy Communion?
That, again, another good question. Because some people, tell their pastors, and sometimes the pastors, they may not have all the facts, and so they might say, well, no, you need to be married. You need to maintain conjugal living in the same house, sharing that marital life together in one roof.
Yeah.
But really and truly, especially for infidelity, that is a just cause for separation. It's right there in the law of the church and the Code of Canon Law. It's there because of mercy. Right? They don't want you to remain in an uninhabitable, position.
Right, especially if there's like abuse, right?
Exactly, abuse or constant arguing, abuse, anything of that sort.
The church is never saying stay there or else.
Yeah, no, the church doesn't say put your life in jeopardy,
right.
All for the sake of marriage. It's actually, separate for the sake of your marriage,
right.
So that you can give yourselves an opportunity to reconcile, to forgive, to go through counseling, to go through whatever it takes. And so you can receive the sacraments validly. You can. That does not put you in a state of mortal sin.
Right.
You could definitely receive the sacraments.
And because the church doesn't recognize a legal divorce or even legal separation, because the church has a higher authority.
That's right.
Then are the cases in which people have gotten a civil divorce and cannot receive Holy Communion, is that specifically because they've made a decision or they're living in a state where they're violating the Sixth Commandment? Say let me be really clear about what I mean. So if someone has married validly in the church and then they go and there's not been an investigation into whether the marriage was valid, and they went ahead and went through with a civil divorce, they're not in a state of sin so long as they're living chastely, right?
That's correct.
It's when, and this is a general rule of thumb for everybody, when you are not living chastely, if whatever state of life you're in, if you're violating the Sixth Commandment, you're not in a position to receive Holy Communion anyway. So
True.
This is not specific to people who are married. This is, but if you are married, you go through a civil divorce, and then you start shacking up with somebody.
Right.
Or you're sleeping around and you haven't, that's whether you're married or not, right? Then you're not in the proper state to enter into communion, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And so it's not I want to exclude you because you're going through a difficulty in your marriage. It's the opposite. Quite the opposite is true. What did you say earlier? Mercy is the first
law of the church.
Yeah,
always mercy.
Because people can get really legalistic with this stuff.
They can get real legalistic, but
no, you're breaking the rules.
Yes, absolutely.
But mercy's the first. It's the first one.
It's the first one. It's the first one. Even at the end of the code, it's the purpose of these canons of the law of the church. It's for the salvation of souls.
Yeah.
It's for the salvation of souls.
Yeah, it's not for the joy of swinging a hammer.
Right, exactly. Yeah. cold hard justice.
Yeah, exactly. No, not here so much. Okay, great. Thanks for clearing that up. We have another really good question. It's kind of long, but it's really interesting. This one comes from Terry. I'll just read the question, then we can go from there. A couple of years ago, I met a lady on a dating site from the Philippines. On her profile, she identified herself as separated. After several messages back and forth, we decided to video chat. One conversation led to another, and I asked her to explain the status of separated. She explained she had been married some 20 years earlier, we're assuming by the church here. It's Philippines. However, after the marriage, her husband became abusive and unfaithful. She called him out on his behavior, and he would become angry, etc., etc. He begged for a second chance. She gave it to him. So she finally kicked him out and has had no communication with him in over a decade. She says she doesn't know where he is now. So then I asked, why is she on a dating site? And a sister suggested she could meet a good man if she did so. As her marriage is sacramental, she will need an annulment to pursue any relationships. However, without a civil divorce, which for those of you listening who don't know, civil divorce is illegal in the Philippines, I don't know how it would work. I have looked for the marriage tribunal in the diocese that she lives in, but can find no information. I live in the U.S., she lives in the Philippines. Can you explain how I would go about getting information so that she can petition for the annulment process?
All right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Of course. Yeah, so the Philippines doesn't recognize divorce. The Catholic Church has not recognized divorce. It just doesn't exist.
Right.
The marriage either is or isn't, or was or wasn't.
Right.
Right. So, but in the Philippines, even though they don't recognize civil divorce, they do recognize annulment, the annulment process,
Right.
both at their own government, right? So if two non-baptized persons married, they'd have to go through the annulment process, right, of the state, right, of the Philippines.
A natural marriage.
A natural marriage, correct. Now, if two baptized persons got married, with sacramental marriage, they would have to do two things. Annulment on the part of the state of the Philippines and annulment on the part of the church, right? So there is a possibility to be married. So that's what it would take. You have to go through an annulment, because you cannot have two marriages at the same time. It's not possible.
Right.
Only one.
I want to dig just a little bit further into that answer. It's such a good question. It's got so many but there's so many like little caveats, right? So we'll finish answering that after a short break. But you're listening to Father Raymond Pendleton on The Quest. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. You can listen to us live on grnonline.com or on your GRN network app. We'll be right back.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. The U.S. Army is keeping a training video for base guards in the news, the one that labeled pro-life Americans as terrorists in line with ISIS. Catholic Vote says an apology from U.S. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth may be making matters worse. The Secretary's apology seems to have confused pro-life Operation Rescue, explicitly mentioned in training material, with an animal rights group that equates human dignity with animals. Police in Baltimore have arrested a suspect in the attack last year on two pro-life men outside an abortion business. Prosecution of the brutal attacks begins next week. This is Life News Radio. Prayer is essential. Without it, God acts and we are merely puppets on strings. So your participation in creating a new culture of life is not merely important, it is critical. Take the time to find silence. Seek to learn how God views human life and pray. A culture of life depends on your life in God. Pray for a culture of life. The story of a Texas woman rescued from denial of ordinary food and water is highlighting a growing problem. Texas Right to Life says that, once relied on for compassionate care near the end of life, far too many hospice providers now consider food and water extraordinary care and will too often refuse family requests for this properly understood ordinary care. And Life News is following how Democrats are either re-escalating political rhetoric or consigning Kamala Harris to defeat in November. Some media outlets are trying to assert that the vice president's race or gender should exempt her from political criticism. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
You're listening to The Quest, a pilgrimage of faith. Have a question or something to share? Call the show live at 877-757-9424.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back. So good to be with you on this lovely Monday afternoon. If you're just tuning in, I'm here with Father Raymond Pendleton of the Diocese of Corpus Christi. He is about to start his third year studying canon law at the Angelicum in Rome. And we are answering all of your annulment-related questions. Just to catch you up, just before the break, we were talking about basically a situation where someone is sacramentally married in the Philippines where civil divorce is illegal. And they haven't had any contact. They're estranged from their spouse for, it seemed like, over a decade. And so in the case where you have been estranged from your spouse, to whom you are, we assume, right, sacramentally married until proven otherwise, you are sacramentally married, you haven't heard from him in 10 years, you want to move on with your life, you want to look into the annulment process, whatever it is, first of all, you obviously have to contact your diocese, right? But in this really specific case, what can be done if the other person, right, the other party is MIA, they can't be reached, they've fallen out of existence? Can you even go through an annulment process, or do you have to have the other person standing at attention and filling out all the paperwork, holding your hands under sparkles and
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I understand what you mean.
Okay.
The sparkles. Definitely the sparkles part.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good question. So the annulment process, so first of all, I'll say there's hope for the annulment process to continue. Okay, so if one of those aspects is missing, so let's say you've tried everything, right? And that is the important thing, that you do try everything to obtain at least the address. So all that's really needed is a mailing address, the address of the other party, right? That's all that's needed. Now with technology, there are websites, can't really list them off the top of my head right now, but you do the work, go on Google, call people. There are people who know these things. There are websites, where if you have the basic information, the name, date of birth, parents' names, all that stuff, you can
do
find
so safely,
out.
knock on their tia's door.
Exactly. Yeah. But try everything you can with every means available. And here's why. It's not just to check out, this box. Okay, this is what we need for the process. The church requires this, asks this, because it's rooted in natural law, the right of defense. So we do need to have the other party able to chime in the process, to also be able to testify if they would like. Now, they don't always want to, so when a diocese tribunal sends in the letter to the other party, to the other spouse, they may write in there, okay, just inform me of the final decision, but appoint an advocate for me. Okay, I don't need to be a part of this process. But at the very least, to give them the opportunity to provide a testimony of sorts, or to say, wait, hold back up. I remember the facts of this case. This may, this is a valid marriage, or this isn't a valid marriage. But anyway, to give them the chance to chime in, to give their own testimony at the very least. So that's important.
So we want to try so that it's fair, so that all parties can, share their testimony to make a just ruling. But in the event that they can't be reached, the annulment process can and will continue.
It can and will continue.
You just have to give them opportunity.
Yep. The judge will just make a note. Okay, we've tried to reach them. We've done all possible means, especially when people move to another country and it's difficult to find them. Yeah. So it's possible, but give them the means, the opportunity to testify.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. There are so many questions. I want to make sure we can get to them.
They're all good, I'm sure.
This one's okay. So this person is saying, this one's from Jeremy. My wife entered the church a year and a half before our wedding. Over the last 15 years, she no longer attends Mass and has now rejected the core tenets of the faith. Would it be possible for our marriage to be annulled if she was sincere at the time of our marriage, but now lives as a non-Catholic and refuses to raise our kids in the faith?
Okay. Very good question, Mr. Jeremy. Two things. One, again, so a marriage is proven valid until otherwise declared, right, by the church. But two, one of the things that annuls a marriage is, of course, there are things that happen at the time of the celebration. Now, if all conditions are right, she knew sufficiently, what the duties of marriage were, right? She knew that it was it's an exclusive relationship. It's a partnership between the man and woman, between the spouses exclusively, right? That it lasts until death do us part. That one of the purposes of marriage is to bring children into the world, to raise them. She knows all of these things, right? And she knows the tenets of the Catholic faith and all that entails, in terms of how to be a good Catholic spouse, Catholic mother. If all that's right, and you say she's sincere, then it's not grounds for an annulment. It is like infidelity. It is grounds for separation. So you can always go to your diocesan bishop, let him know the facts, and he can issue a decree. He'll say, okay, you're legally separated in the eyes of the church, and that would guarantee you, surety that you can receive the sacraments, without wondering whether or not you're in a state of mortal sin.
Right.
But it's a just ground for separation, but not for an annulment.
Right.
If it didn't exist prior to the marriage and during the marriage celebration.
Right. That makes sense. So we're getting questions from people asking, is this grounds for an annulment? Does this make my marriage, or could this reason be a reason my marriage would be declared null? Right. We're getting lots of questions like that. So I think the big broad question here is what's required to enter into a valid marriage?
Yeah, the list is long.
Yeah.
Okay.
A,
B, all the way to Z, and then we have to go through the Greek alphabet.
What are the basic requirements?
But the basic requirement is this. So in order to understand, what are impediments, what prevents you from being capable of contracting a marriage, of entering into a marriage, it deals with the actual, with the very definition of marriage. It's a lifetime partnership between a man and a woman, right? Geared towards the good of the spouses, the bringing, into life children, raising a family, and then also their education. So those are the essential obligations of marital life, right? Now, what renders a marriage invalid is that in this process, the church finds through the judges that actually this person was not capable of contracting, because this person wasn't ready to take on the duties of marriage, right? For whatever reason, it could be severe alcoholism, like he just couldn't consent, or she couldn't consent, some other kind of psychic illness, so mental illness that just prevents them from taking on, these responsibilities,
because
or preventing them.
Because you can't consent.
You can't consent
to those responsibilities.
You cannot exchange those vows.
Right. You don't have, you essentially lack the capability that is required in order to consent and exchange these vows if you, say, for instance, have this severe psychological distress that inhibits you from being able to consent and properly make those vows.
Right.
Well, that's really, that's very beautiful, right? That if this is what we're doing here is we're uplifting the beautiful definition of what marriage is, and we're saying, were you capable of doing this? Of at the time that you were married, were all of the requirements met? Like, could you, did you, et cetera, et cetera. That's a nice
so I hope that answers that question. Look at the definition of marriage, and were the spouses, either of the parties or both the parties, sometimes it's both, are unable to contract a marriage, to make the marriage covenant.
For example, one of the requirements in order to enter into a valid sacramental marriage is that you do so freely.
Right.
And you can't enter freely into the sacrament of marriage if there is a shotgun involved.
Right.
Just to make it
metaphorical or real.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's at the end of the day, this is more common, maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or beyond. But yeah, if you are not fully and freely entering into the sacrament because you, for whatever reason, someone's forcing you, making you feel like you have to, but you really don't want to. That's part of the investigation process, right? Of getting having a marriage declared valid or otherwise.
Right.
Did you freely, right? Did you understand that it was exclusive, et cetera, et cetera? So, and then you suddenly wake up one day and change your mind 30 years in.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, at the time of the marriage,
right.
Always the important question.
Exactly. Not tomorrow. So there are so many great questions. I mean, the hour just always flies by. But let's see if we can get a really big one here. It could be a really long answer, but hopefully we can
do my best, Sarah.
Yeah.
Do my best.
This is from Anonymous, how does the annulment process work? Which I think we've kind of answered, but the big question here is, what if I can't afford it? I've heard it's expensive.
Oh my gosh. You know what? It is free 99. Okay. The annulment process, because of this wonderful document Pope Francis issued in 2015, it's called Mitis Iudex Dominus Jesus, right? So we're talking about mercy here, mercy of Christ here. He actually prohibits the imposition of fees in that. Like, tribunals are not to require, in order for the process to continue,
it's a hard cue,
or for the parties to receive notification of the final decision, right? Whether the annulment was declared, or whether the marriage was declared annulled or not, right? The parties have the right to know what happened during the process, right? They have the right to know that. Pope Francis abolished fees. Now, if you want to make a donation, that's up to you. But the process has to continue. It must move on. Right. The bishop can ask for a donation to be made, but the process must go on, regardless of what's received or not. So no fees, are necessary.
It's free 99.
Yeah, it's free 99.
Make a donation if you want. I mean, it's us, right? It's the people working out in the world. I say working because, well, so for some people,
I understand.
We're working. If we want the sacraments, we should pay for the lights to be on at the parish. I'm a big advocate for that.
If it's within your means, make a donation, tithe, But if it's not, it shouldn't keep you from petitioning.
Well, that's the same. I mean, it's the same logic, right? We're not going to not baptize your infant or marry you if you can't. If you're you're living in poverty. You still get the sacraments.
Right. It's called simony, I think. If you sell your sacraments, anything sacred,
All right, going down the simony path today. Absolutely. And so don't let fear of, don't let the fear of it costing too much stop you, because say the document one more time so we sound cool.
Mitis Iudex Dominus Jesus. So,
which roughly translates to free 99.
Free 99. Yes.
Can't charge a fee for your annulment. Okay.
Yes. So be not afraid. If you need to petition, do so without worrying about the cost. There is no imposed cost.
All right. We're coming up on our last break and our last segment here, but I think we can get these two questions. And so I think, this one's a big one for me. I feel like I encountered this one a lot in the work that I do I work with teens, so the teens are not the ones asking the question, but when I'm at a parish or at a retreat, I don't know why. Well, I talk about theology of the body a lot, right? And the Sixth Commandment a lot. It's kind of my jam. And this comes up. And so we can talk about the question and I'll work us get us towards the break. This comes from Kayla. What's the right way to go about dating or getting engaged when you are waiting for the annulment to be granted?
Wow, what a question. Like, really though, what a humble question. Is you want to be close to Christ and his church. That is the most important thing. It's all about salvation.
Yeah.
So I will tell you this, number one, practically, do not, bold, underline, do not set a date for your marriage.
Can I follow that up?
Please.
Don't date.
Yeah.
Don't get engaged. When you are going through the annulment process, you're presuming God's mercy.
Right. Chastity is such an important virtue.
Yes.
That gets you to heaven.
Yes.
But wedding date and chastity, don't date. I know it's hard. to be alone.
Is it hard? I mean, you're not dating.
It can be.
It's not
It
that
can
hard.
be difficult
It's not that
for
hard.
some people.
Okay. All right. Well,
But chastity is a virtue.
Yes. We'll hop right back into that question. It's a really, really good question. Like Father Raymond's been saying all break. But I'm your Monday, Thursday host of The Quest, Sarah Soto. We will be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for July 29th. Today we celebrate Saints Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. We can certainly say that Martha and her siblings were close friends of Jesus. He came to their home simply as a welcomed guest. The sisters felt free to call on Jesus at their brother's death. As we learn from 3 gospel accounts, Martha was the busy one, occupying herself with household duties when Jesus visited, while Mary sat at Jesus' feet. Martha spoke directly to Jesus about the death of her brother, while Mary waited at home. At dinner with Jesus just before his passion, Martha served the meal, and Mary anointed their guests' feet. Much about the life of Lazarus remains a mystery, but legends abound about how he lived following Christ's death and resurrection. One story has Lazarus, Martha, and Mary landing safely in Cyprus after being put into a leaking boat. Lazarus then served as bishop for 30 years and died peacefully. When a church was built in his honor in Constantinople, relics believed to be his were transferred there. None of us shares Lazarus's first-hand knowledge of returning from the grave, but we share his belief that one day Jesus will raise us too. There's more about the saints, along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
This is The Quest from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network. Share the show with a friend. You can find us on social media. Want to listen again? We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts.
Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm your Monday, Thursday host of The Quest, Sarah Soto. I'm on video today, so you're gonna have to excuse me because I'm used to not being on video. I'm excited that we're doing video, but you have to get used to my endless, quirky,
flute playing.
I was actually flute miming. That was air flute. If you want to be specific, we want to be honest with our listeners here, it was air flute.
It sounded good.
My Franciscan Media air flute is my favorite segue back into the show. Okay, it pumps me up. So I'm here with Father Raymond Pendleton. Today we're talking about all things
It's such a sad subject.
It's so great. No, it's so great to have a guest on that's your friend, future patron of Orange Chicken, all wrapped up in a nice Canon lawyer. It just worked out so well. There are a lot of things I want to say, but first and foremost, Father Raymond, he has a way of bringing me back down to earth. There's this great meme I saw the other day that was it's like a knight in armor, and it's just like a tiny little slit for his eyes, and it has a caption where he's saying, I'm doing so well overcoming sin. I'm living so righteously, like nothing can, hurt me. And then the next little slide is an arrow in the tiny slit, and it's labeled pride.
That's right.
Which is it's so fitting.
I love that meme.
It's so good.
I love it.
Did you see it? You've seen it?
I have, yeah. Okay. I've seen that.
Did I send it to you?
It's like a variation.
Okay.
Did you send it to me? Maybe.
I'm like, where are you seeing memes? Like in the
I have
internet?
a computer.
Oh. Okay, I saw you on this one earlier. It didn't seem like you'd used
a
one
laptop,
before.
as the people call it.
Oh boy. So I want to, you pointed out before the break this great question from Kayla. What's the right way to go about dating or getting engaged while you're waiting for an annulment to be granted? And you said, see, this is so sincere. She wants to remain close to Christ. She's trying to do it the right way. And I'm like, I had smoke I had to put out that started coming out of my ears. Not against Kayla, just there's this, we have failed, right? We have failed to, no one showed me that I had to learn more stuff than was taught to me from the few classes I took leading up to being confirmed at age 7, and then piecing everybody out and being like, I'm Catholic. I know I know. Trust. I know it all. I learned it all. And so it's not her, and it's not the many people who have set wedding dates when they haven't received a declaration back from their annulment. But there are so many things to be said, right? Like, if you're dating somebody, there ought to be, rightly ordered, there should be attraction and desire for communion. And when you are still, we presume, validly married by the church, whether or not there was infidelity or whether or not there was the use of contraception from the get, I mean, whatever it was, right? Like, we assume that the marriage is valid until otherwise declared by the wisdom and authority of the church. And so to date and to have that communion-minded relationship that's ordered towards, right, the conjugal life, I mean, that's where it's heading, is disordered. And we shouldn't be dating.
Right.
We shouldn't be
engaged.
No kidding, because it's like I know in your mind you're not living a conjugal life with this person, and so I get it, and your heart is not there, and I sympathize for the pain and the sorrow. They obviously didn't hope for this, right, when you were getting married. That wasn't the goal. I mean, I hope not. Yeah. And so all that being said, like, I understand the human heart because I've got one. And so, like, I get it. But if we want to do things in the proper order and we want to live the virtue of chastity, then we need to wait for the church in her wisdom to make a declaration about that marriage before we even consider dating. Yeah. I know you got pressure from people. Girl, you better get on out there. You're not getting any younger. Who's going to take care of you? Like, I get it. I mean, I'm a person with a human heart. Like, I totally get it. But we also have to remember that it would so be better to die as a person upholding your vows because you're assuming they were valid, to die by yourself than to die shacked up with somebody while you're waiting for a declaration on your marriage.
Yeah, no, well said. No, Sarah, that's well said. Chastity will get you into heaven.
Yeah. This
new, like, remarriage, quotation marks in the air. Okay.
They can see you on video.
Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, that's right. Technology. This new marriage, this new relationship, I'll say relationship you're entering into, that won't get you into heaven. Yeah. But chastity can and will, because that is a virtue lived most perfectly by Christ himself and by our Blessed Mother Mary.
Amen.
And of course Saint Joseph. Yeah. Right, all the saints, to some degree, they practice this. Like, even of the married saints, they practice chastity. It's such an important virtue.
And in my style, I just have to say, nobody ever died from waiting to date.
That is such a Sarah style. That's correct.
You're not going to die.
But even
from waiting to date somebody. I mean, you're not going to die from not sleeping with somebody. That's not going to happen. So it's much more, I mean, was it St. Teresa of Avila? I'm going to get it wrong. I think it was St. Teresa of Avila that said she'd rather die than commit even one venial sin, which offend something very like, and say, okay, you're looking at me like I'm.
That sounds,
that sounds
right.
Made up.
But then there's also like different variations of the way that sits.
Yeah,
but that sounds right.
But we should rather suffer immensely than offend God. Even
no, I
in
think
the
St.
slightest.
Teresa of Avila does say that.
Hey, thanks.
No, that's correct.
Thanks. No, I appreciate you. You had some faith in me.
Yeah, I did. It was there.
So that being said, the proper way to go about dating and getting engaged and setting a wedding date while you wait for the annulment process is to not do those things, because there's also a chance that the church is going to declare that your marriage is valid, and therefore you are absolutely not free to go on and have another relationship, and certainly not free to marry.
Yeah. The promise that you made, the exchange of vows or consent or however you want to call that, but that is sacred.
Oh, yeah.
Whether natural marriage or not, or sacramental, either way is sacred. And so you'd break that promise. You break that sacred vow. That is such a grave thing to do. We have to consider that to be a very grave matter, because it is. It's truly grave.
Make marriage serious again. Make marriage grave again. Did you watch The Office? I feel like you.
I've seen some episodes. Yeah.
There's it's like an Amish, like a Pennsylvania Dutch family, and they're like it's like they marry standing in their own graves. Like it's very make marriage very serious again.
Man.
So as per usual, it's been a really well. We'll dig into this last question here, and then I may run a couple of things by if we have time. But from James, can an annulment be granted? I know where a lot of this. Can I get an annulment for this? Can I get an annulment for that? Can annulment be granted for someone who is suffering from emotional, physical, or financial abuse? I think we sort of answered that. You said
we'll answer that. Yeah, so de facto, like just the mere fact of that, no, that's not a ground of not grounds for annulment. But if as we said earlier, if that's proof that the person was not capable of entering into a marriage, okay, that's very helpful to know. So in your petition, if you'd send a petition, you'd write these things in your testimony as a petitioner, and so that may point to the fact that that person was not able to enter into marriage, and that itself, the lack of knowledge or the lack of the will, like the freedom we were talking about earlier, that would render the marriage null. So that would, but not necessarily like abuse, as hard as that is, as sad as that is.
So I've shared one of the main reasons I've wanted to do this show for a really long time, and I think we'll start to close the show with this, and I'm curious to know what you think. I was serving in Belize City, and about 30 minutes driving north, like through the jungle, with no AC. We were going to a mission parish, and we picked up this woman on the way there, Miss Martita. Miss Martita was the only reason any of the children in this tiny village were receiving any sacraments, were getting to know any prayers whatsoever, right? She was like, anyway.
She was like Martha.
Yeah. Long story short, she was married a long time before and had 9 children, and her husband was extremely abusive, so she packed up the children, had a legal separation, never married, never divorced, but lived out her vows until she's still today.
Truly admirable.
Oh,
that is, you don't hear that too often.
I'm telling you, let's be like Miss Martita, future patron saint of the annulment process. Thanks so much for listening, you all, here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. I'm your Monday, Thursday host, Sarah Soto. Thank you, Father Raymond Pendleton, for coming, future canon lawyer and dear friend of mine, on the show today. You can listen to Spotify, where all your favorite podcasts are for today's show. Share with your friends. I'll share on my Instagram. As always, God bless you.
Celebrating 2,000 years of truth. This is the Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.